And he and I, when we were 9 at the summer camp or the summer school in our town, we chose the trumpet together. We both started at the same time. And his son is like 15 or 16 and is like a composer who's like winning awards.
That's wonderful.
I know. I just sent him an email over the summer and I said, can you imagine 37 years ago where that trumpet decision led us? And now, it's crazy. Crazy to think about that. Hello, everyone. Welcome to Everything Band, a podcast that features conversations with composers, conductors, and performers of music for winds and percussion. My name is Mark Connor. I'm a composer, and this is episode 25. My guest for this episode is conductor Andrew Ardizzoia. Before we begin, I'd like to thank all of you and welcome my new listeners. In recent weeks, there has been a notable increase in the number of downloads of the podcast. I am humbled and thrilled to welcome all of you to this show. I love the community of musicians in the concert band world, and I'd like to hear from you. Please leave me a rating on iTunes or send me an email with your feedback. Now, on to the episode. Hi, Andrew.
Hi there.
So thanks for joining me today.
Sure.
You and I met on social media a few years ago, and we have lots of connections.
We do.
That are pretty funny, actually. But so we may talk about some of those or may leave them out. But can you tell me a little bit about sort of your musical beginnings, how you got to start?
I, like a lot of band geeks, I got my start in 5th grade. I, for some reason, thought French horn was what I wanted to do. And I was the only one who didn't pick trombone or trumpet or saxophone or flute or clarinet. And, very small school district in Northern California outside San Francisco, where there was really one band director between the middle school and the high school. So I was with the same director all through that time. And then in high school, a chemistry teacher who had an interest in classical music noticed that I was beginning to take music more seriously and suggested that I start lessons, and actually helped pay for some of my first lessons. He offered to help my parents pay for lessons for the first couple of years. And I found myself studying with a horn teacher named Glenn Swartz in San Francisco. And that opened up a whole world to me of music outside of the band world, starting to play in youth orchestras and the solo repertoire, and so on. He took me to band camp. He had been hired to teach at the band camp at University of the Pacific one summer. And he said, I think you should go to this band camp that I'm going to do. And that was the beginning of my relationship with the University of the Pacific. I guess they recognized that I was pretty serious about it, and started recruiting me in my sophomore, junior year of high school. I went back for 3 years and then ended up there on a horn performance scholarship, but with a composition major, and spent 4 years playing in everything, at a small conservatory. It's all undergrad at Pacific. You play in the orchestra, and you play in wind ensemble, and you play chamber music, and you play in the pit orchestra for the musical. And so I did a lot of playing and a lot of watching conductors and a lot of just sort of trying to decide what I wanted to do with my career. And at that point, I really thought I wanted to be a conductor. And I had this sort of career path charted for myself as to the extent that you can when you're 22. And when I graduated, I thought I'm going to go out and I'm going to be a conductor. And it didn't turn out the way I thought it would. I was studying really intensely, privately, with a conductor in Sacramento. And when push came to shove a few years later, when it was time to decide, where I wanted to go for grad school and what I wanted to do for grad school, I really decided that composition was what I wanted to do. I was happy that I had that skill set as a conductor, but I didn't see myself doing it as a career, exclusively for the rest of my life. And that's when I went back to Arizona State, got my master's degree in composition there. And then a year later was accepted at the Hart School to study composition as well. And I finished in 2014. So that's, in a nutshell, that's what it looks like, but it was basically horn into conducting and then back to composition, and that's really where I am now, with conducting as a sort of a side hustle, I guess you could say.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So I'm interested in a couple things you mentioned there. So Mr. Swartz, your horn teacher, did I get his name? Okay.
Yeah.
So what you mentioned that he really opened your eyes by exposing you to these things. Was there something intangible, or was there something about him that you remember specifically that made that sort of inspired you as a child?
What I liked about Glenn's teaching at the time was that Glenn is a fabulous horn player. But his pedagogy wasn't intensely technical. We didn't spend a ton of time talking about embouchure and hand placement and that sort of thing. I think we got to a point where I was making a pretty good sound on the horn, but it was really more musical, and the technique flowed from the musicianship. I don't know if that makes sense, but I think there's a quote from Jacqueline Dupre where she says, if you have a technical problem, find a musical answer. And that was really what it was like with Glenn. And, to contrast that, when I went to Pacific and studied with a horn player named George Nemeth, it was very technical, and, my, mouth was all wrong and hand was all wrong. And even, there were lots of technical things that he discovered right away, and he sent me back to book one of the Maxime Alphonse etudes, but with an eye to technical things. And so in a way, it was a good transition, because I had some basic, musical things in place, but I needed some technique to really get the playing off the ground.
Sure.
But, super technical pedagogy with younger musicians can be a real turnoff.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So how about at UOP? You said that by the time you were 22, you wanted to be a conductor. And so I know Eric Hammer at UOP. Do you want to talk about that experience with him?
Yeah. I mean, I studied conducting with Eric. I got, I can't believe I asked for stuff like this, but I got some kind of dispensation to test out of undergraduate conducting class. And I did a year of independent study with Eric, where we just talked about very basic things, because I had some conducting technique already. And because I played horn and because I was a composition major, I knew, all of the sort of transpositions and things from having studied scores. I could do all of that. I didn't need that. But what I needed was, well, why are you doing this? And what do you want to accomplish here? And talking more stylistic sorts of things. But one of the things about a place like Pacific is that if you're motivated and you're smart and you kind of want to do your own thing, they're not going to really stand in your way as long as you're tending to all of your classes and everything. So, we would organize things like pickup performances of the core repertoire. We had a little pickup orchestra that would get together every now and then and read, a Mozart piano concerto if somebody had been working on that, even if it was just one on a part, or the music fraternities and sororities would get together at Christmas and do a Messiah performance and then donate the proceeds to charity. We'd get a local church to host us. So that was the sort of thing. It was really learning by experience and by, trial and error and see what works and what doesn't. But, that was something that I could do at a place like Pacific that I don't think I could have done, at a bigger institution where you would have been competing with grad students for those sorts of resources.
Yeah, I have similar experience up in Chico. When I was up there, I was able to sing in the opera and do all sorts of crazy things that I would have never guessed that I would have done when I started.
Well, and all undergraduate institutions like that, you're not competing to try to get into the top orchestra because there are 12 DMA cellists trying to get, we need an orchestra. So all hands on deck was the philosophy.
Speaking of big programs, how about Arizona State? Do you have anything indelible from that experience?
It was, and this is one of the things that I've loved about the schools that I've attended is that they've all been so different from one another, to go from a small private institution to, I think Arizona State flips back and forth with Ohio State for the largest public institution in the country. 40,000, 60,000 students, just this enormous institution. Yeah, it was very different, but it's hard to describe what was different about it, because of course you're going from undergrad to master's program. But what was great about Arizona State was just the experiences that they provided you with on an almost daily basis, right? Like one day the St. Lawrence String Quartet is there. The next day, William Bolcom is in residence. The next day, Jonathan Newman is here. It was just this ongoing thing of big name ensembles and big name composers and scholars coming through all the time. And of course, this was my first taste of, just super high end wind band music with Gary Hill and Wayne Bailey and the program that they've built out there. To hear the big repertoire played so incredibly well, with such master conductors was really, really spectacular.
Yeah. I went to Florida State for my doctorate, so I understand.
Yes, what it's like.
School phenomena.
Yeah.
So then you went to Hart for your doctorate, and Hart is a smaller conservatory, but no less fine an institution.
Yeah.
And so how was that experience as far as getting you to where you are now? So I'll tell everyone that you're the new assistant professor at Muhlenberg College in Allentown, Pennsylvania.
Correct.
And that's so right. How did Hart shape for that job?
It sounds cliche, but Hart was a world away from these Western U.S. schools that I had studied at, on the West Coast, and then in, I guess, what we call now the inner West or the Southwest in Arizona. But, almost immediately when I got to Hart, I noticed that there was a difference in priorities in terms of the composers that I was sort of compared to and the composers that I was being sent to for models. When I would sit down, I'd say, I don't know what to do here with my teacher. We could talk about, Samuel Barber, for instance. I don't think Samuel Barber ever came up when I was an undergrad or a master's student out West, but to come to the East Coast, there is a sort of a regionalism there. And I should make it abundantly clear that I'm not comparing myself to Samuel Barber in any way, but it was, oh, well, your music is kind of headed in that direction. Why don't you check out Samuel Barber as a model, or check out Aaron Copland as a model? Whereas out West, I think there's a more sort of do-it-yourself mentality and a little bit more of a maverick mentality. Mm-hmm. It was interesting to hear the difference among composers that came up in conversation, I guess I should say. But I studied for a year with Robert Carl, who's maybe not so well known in the band world. But then I spent a year and change studying with Steve Gritch, who's fairly well known in the band world. He's worked really closely with Eric at the University of New Mexico. Eric Rombach Kendall has commissioned a lot of music from him, and Glenn Adsit does his music all the time at Hart. And that was really where the band thing started to come into focus for me. I spent that time studying with Stephen just for the orchestration. I wanted to brush up my orchestration and polish my orchestration. And he has this eye and ear for instrumental color, whether it's orchestra, band, chamber music, that's just can't be beat. And so I got a lot out of him in terms of orchestration, and a lot out of Robert Carl in terms of just philosophy and why am I making the musical decisions that I'm making, and what is my sort of long-term goal with a given piece. So it was this really nice balance of technical and sort of spiritual. And that was really where I started to take band as a as a medium a lot more seriously than I had been as a master's student.
So, Andrew, how much a part of your work is writing for concert band?
It's not the majority of what I do, although most of the large ensemble pieces that I've written over the last 10 years or so have been for wind band in some configuration or another. A couple of years ago, I found myself with this sort of glut of percussion music that I was being asked to write. And, my catalog is really sort of varied, vocal music, chamber music, percussion ensemble. And then there is a fair amount of band music. But I haven't really charted my career in such a way that that's what I wanted to do. And I had plans to make that sort of an exclusive part of my output.
Right. And so your job at Muhlenberg is a kind of a mixed job. You're there to teach composition, to teach music theory, and to conduct the band. Am I correct?
Mm-hmm. That's right. Yeah. So this is it's a new position that combines a couple of old positions, which is what happens in higher ed these days.
Yep.
It's director of composition and then also director of instrumental studies, which includes directing the wind ensemble. So we're in a process of reimagining what it is on campus, but this is kind of the way higher ed is nowadays. Depending on the day I wear a different hat.
Yeah, there's a tremendous tradition of music in the Lehigh Valley, correct?
Yeah. I'm still learning about that, but Allentown itself has 2 or 3 municipal community bands. Choral music is a huge tradition here because of the German heritage that was once so prevalent here. The Allentown Symphony, I haven't heard them yet, but by all accounts, they are a very fine ensemble. So yeah, there's a lot of music here, which can be, I think, for a small private college, can be a good thing or a bad thing because you have to find your niche in that world. But Muhlenberg seems to be doing it fairly well, so I'm excited to be part of it.
Yeah, I often see references to that region. And episode number 2, I interviewed Scott Watson. Do you know Scott?
No, I don't.
Scott's a band composer. He lives in Allentown and he teaches in the schools there. And he was my guest for episode 2. I'm sure that he'll reach out when he hears this. Hi, Scott.
Hi, Scott. Looking forward to meeting you. I have a ton of people I have to meet. It's, it's just getting settled on campus, and then I'll start to reach out to folks in the area.
Yeah. No, it's difficult.
Yeah.
I think also my guest, Mike Colburn, who talked about early brass bands pre-Sousa, I think that one of the groups that he focuses on is from that area also. I'll have to look that up. But,
yeah, that's entirely possible.
So what's your priority now for revitalizing and building the instrumental program?
It's a little early to say. One of the challenges that we're facing here at Muhlenberg at the moment is that we have a lot more interest in vocal music than we do in instrumental music. And a part of that is because we have a very vibrant a very vibrant theater program. And a lot of those students take lessons and sing in choir and so on. I think what we're going to be looking at over the next couple of years is just very targeted recruiting in terms of specific instruments and specific types of students that we want. I don't think we'll ever be, Indiana. We'll never be Michigan, but that's not our job. We're a liberal arts institution, and we hold fast to the idea of the liberal model, the liberal arts model. So I think what we're going to be looking for over the next couple of years are instrumentalists who have a lot of different interests and want to participate in a lot of different activities, but who want to make music and playing their instruments a sort of key part of their experience as undergrads. And I think that's something that sets us apart from a lot of schools. We don't offer the Bachelor of Music. We offer a Bachelor of Arts, and that's something we're actually really proud of. And we attract very smart, very motivated, very hardworking students. I think for us, it's just a matter of getting the word out that we're here and this is what we do. And if you think this is what you want out of college, come and join us. The Wind Ensemble right now is I don't know, maybe half and half, majors, non-majors. But it's been surprising how many people have kind of come out of the woodwork over the course of the summer and over the course of orientation is just wrapping up this weekend, saying, I want to be a part of this. And that's all I can ask for at this point. If you love band, if you love playing in band, then that's good enough for me, for the time being.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's what it should be. I posted a picture on Facebook last night of myself with the community band I play in, and there's a wide range of talent in that group, but man, it's just a fun group. And it just, every time we play, it just reminds me, okay, yeah, I remember why I do what I do.
Yeah. And it can be, that was what my community band in Waterbury was like that. They were a sponsored campus ensemble, but they had existed for many years before coming to campus as a community band. And one thing led to another, and all of a sudden they were on campus. And it can be a little bit hard. I think, community band directors have a real challenge in terms of programming music that is accessible for the audience, accessible for the band, but also challenges and teaches and explores areas that community band members might not normally be used to. And it's really easy to turn people off if you start throwing stuff at them that they're not going to be open to. You have to do it sort of, you have to wrap the pill in a little bit of meat, when you're giving a dog medicine, right? If I wrap it in meat, then okay, I can slip in something a little bit unusual every now and then, and hopefully they come along with you. But it's the same thing at Muhlenberg for now. I agonized over my first program with this band because I want them to enjoy themselves and I want them to feel good about themselves. I think we need to build some morale and some cohesion and some camaraderie. But at the same time, I didn't want to do stuff that they were going to be able to blow through in one rehearsal. And I wanted to challenge myself as well. I want to enjoy what I'm doing,
Yeah. So since this is on your mind, this is a conversation that comes up a lot with some of my guests. What sort of programming decisions have you made? Do you want to share some of that, or is it a surprise?
Sure. No. I have to think, because they're kind of an unknown quantity. I conducted this group in February when I was here for my audition, and I'm basing my programming on what I heard there with some improvements, because numbers are up, luckily, and it looks like it's going to be a fairly balanced ensemble this semester. I'm opening with the Gabriele Canzone, antiphonal brass. We're doing the very first piece I ever conducted in front of a band, David Holsinger's On a Hymn Song of Lowell Mason, which is one of my favorite, just tug at the heartstrings band pieces. We're doing Gerald Posch's arrangement of the Overture to the Magic Flute, which I'm really excited about. That's probably one of the hardest things in the program. We're doing Jack Stamp's arrangement of Joan Tower's Celebration Fanfare. I hope, if it's not a little bit beyond us. I wrote a little 3-minute fanfare based on the school's alma mater. We're doing the Mollman Prelude and Fugue in B flat. And then I haven't decided yet, but we're as a group, we're going to decide between the first suite, the Holst first suite, or the Gordon Jacob suite in B flat. I needed something sort of meaty that they could sink their teeth into, and something that was multi-movement. And I can't decide which one I want to do. And I think I'm going to let them, make up their minds about that. I wasn't sure if I wanted to do the Holst at all because I didn't know what the numbers were going to look like. And I still don't know quite what the quality is going to be like. So that might be a little bit ambitious on my part, but I'm calling the program Eclectic Overtures because it's just a way for me to get to know them and them to get to know me. And I can say, look, this is what I'm into. It's music from all over the map stylistically. And in terms of century and epic and all of that. So that's what I'm thinking. And at least for my first program, and that may all, I may do this program and then decide what I want to do in the spring is not right, and I'll throw it out and we'll start over. I'll tell you though, Mark, the people who have saved me is the band directors group on Facebook. I don't know if you're a member of that really big band directors group. There's like 20,000 members or something, but they have been so helpful in terms of bouncing ideas around, and everybody is so supportive and friendly. Everybody just wants you to succeed. And it's interesting because I think, from what I can tell, it's band directors from all over the map in terms of middle school, high school, college, marching band, concert band. It's a little of everything, but people have really good ideas, and it's nice to have that hive mind to be able to go to if I'm feeling a little unsure about myself.
Yeah, sure. Social media has played such a huge role in sort of growing the community. It's always been a big community. It's always been a welcoming community, but it allows us to travel faster. Mm-hmm. And allows us to make more progress more quickly. And I think it's really interesting. I think I might be a member of that group. I'm not sure. There's a couple, and I kind of get confused what I'm a member of sometimes. Somebody
added me to it. One of my friends must have added me to it because I don't remember joining it. But, when I started to look at what they were discussing, and a lot of it is not stuff that I have any input to provide or any interest in, frankly. But, things like programming, when I just wasn't sure about my program, I said, I don't know if I can do the Holst, and what would you suggest? And out came this outpouring of suggestions for pieces along those lines that might be alternatives. And it's interesting because when you have those discussions, there's usually one or two titles that will float to the top, right? People start mentioning all of these different pieces that they know and love, but eventually you start to get, everybody thinks the Gordon Jacob is a really good fit. And I have to admit, and this is me being a little bit of a little naive, I didn't know the piece at all. And I listened to it. I thought, I think we can do this piece. So yeah, it social media has been wonderful, and I think is a really wonderful resource.
So do you have any advice that you might offer to maybe a new director or a young director about conducting or about teaching? You're entering your first year in Muhlenberg, and there's people out there who are entering their first year as a middle school director or as a high school director. Do you have any sort of hard-earned lessons?
I think the best thing you can do, and don't get ahead of yourself. I'm a really impatient person, Mark. I'm so impatient. And that, I think, as a conductor can be really detrimental. And I have to remind myself constantly, don't get ahead of yourself. Don't get impatient. I had a colleague in my previous position, our theater colleague, and his mantra was trust the process. It doesn't need to be performance ready today. It's what it is today, and it gives us a sense of where we're going and the improvements that we're going to make. But trust the process and trust that it's all going to work out. Trust your players, trust your skill set as an educator and as a conductor, and you'll get there. But I think for me personally, it's a patience thing. I have to be patient, and especially in my first semester with a brand new ensemble that I'm trying to reinvigorate. That I'm trying to reimagine. I'm all smiles and light this year. There's absolutely no room for tyranny in my persona this semester or going forward. Because we're trying to create this welcoming space for majors and non-majors.
You don't strike me as a tyrant in any way.
I try not to be. That was a hard learned lesson. Yeah. Yeah. That doesn't get, vinegar versus honey, right?
Well, and I don't know, I'm going to overgeneralize a little bit, but I think I was a little bit that way when I was younger, and it's taken me a long time to sort of realize that my opinions don't really matter.
True. That's absolutely true.
It's just the ability to be sort of open and magnanimous. It wins you so much more, whether it's in a theory classroom or a high school band room or a middle school room. Now, of course, at a middle school level, you have to be a little bit more tyrannical, but you don't have to be mean about it.
But you know what? Just God bless people who can work with preteens because
I love that age.
I can't do you? You're one of those. You're one of those. I had a classmate at Pacific who, fabulous clarinetist, got a degree in education, went out, got, one of these middle school band jobs, and like within the first year won teacher of the year. I mean, he knows that demographic, and he knows how to work with them, and I just can't do it. They terrify me.
Yeah. They're just like anyone else. They just want to feel like they have some, I think you mentioned earlier, agency.
Yes.
But yet, they also have to have a sort of at least this is my experience. Is there someone out there yelling at me like, no, but from my perspective, you just need to have a strict set of guidelines and have the expectations that they know what they want, what you want from them. And then they want to feel like they're valued. And I like that age. They just really,
and I think I'm not structured enough person. That's not to say that I'm a disaster, but I think I like to be a little bit more flexible in the way that I work with an ensemble or the way that I manage a classroom. And I think that would be at loggerheads with the sort of structure and structure that students need at that age. But, I also, I don't have a degree in education, and that's one of the things that, probably would help with that if I, found myself having to teach high school or middle school band rather.
My college classroom in a lot of ways, a lot of the same sort of self-doubts though still exist, even in a theory 1 class, or especially an oral skills class. I've talked about that on this podcast a lot. That's my frame of reference, 20 years of teaching oral skills versus 4 years as a band director. I'm so weighted in one way.
Yeah.
Okay. So let's talk about composers and band music and the value of having a composer into your ensemble. Mm-hmm. And do you have any plans to commission other composers? Now you're a composer and you're the band director. So what are you looking to do?
I'd like to get a lot out of people that we bring to campus, long story short, and so what my initial thinking is, well, if it's somebody that can compose, if we commission and come out and conduct, and clinic, somebody that has those skill sets, that sounds like a lot of fun to me. I don't know yet who those composers are. And because I have one foot in the band world, and because I have one foot in the world of sort of, I'm making air quotes right now, new music, it'll be interesting to see what that is, because those two worlds don't always overlap necessarily. There are a bunch of composers out there that I'd love to commission at some point. But I think it's also about getting the ensemble to the point where they're going to feel confident in front of a composer. You probably know this, but when you go and work with an ensemble, the first rehearsal with the composer in the room is usually not very good, because there's a little bit of an intimidation factor. Like, oh, he's here, so let's miss all of the notes we possibly can. And then the conductor says, it was so much better last week. And he said, don't worry about it. It'll be fine. And it almost always is. But, I think you kind of have to get an ensemble ready to work with the composer. Or you just pretend it's not a big deal and that this happens all the time.
Right.
And I don't know. I have some names in my head down the road.
Okay. Well, if you want to mention them now, we can call them out on the podcast and use the pressure. We won't do that.
There's one composer in particular, a guy by the name of Brian Samalchik, who was a master's student at Hart when I was there, who writes just absolutely fascinating music. I'm hoping to get him at some point, and we've talked about it already, so I'm not giving anything away here, but he's a fabulous composer.
So Andrew, a lot of my listeners might be wondering what your music's like. What do you have one piece that you would like people to hear?
I was thinking about that as I was getting ready to talk to you. There's a piece that I wrote back in 2012, I guess, that was a consortium commissioned, a bunch of schools spearheaded by Bill Staub, who's the assistant band director at East Carolina University. He's a Northwestern grad. Commissioned a sort of a ballady type piece, and I wrote a piece called Midsummer Pavans for symphonic band. And it's really, I think of sort of all of my band music, that one's probably the most typical in terms of what I've done over the last few years, in terms of harmonic language and melodic shape and form and that sort of thing. And then if I can plug one other piece, a couple of years ago, Mike Galimo at Iowa State commissioned a short fanfare. They hosted the regional CBDNA conference in 2015, I guess. And they got to play, they have an evening concert as the host ensemble. And I wrote a piece called Quod erat demonstrandum, which is a 3-minute, just sort of by the seat of your pants fanfare that seemed to be relatively well received. And those are all available on my website, or if you go to my SoundCloud page.
Cool.
Yeah.
All right. So let's head into the final stretch here.
Okay.
So what do you think are the challenges facing music education or music in the next few decades?
Oh, gosh.
There are many.
There are a lot, and it's hard to pick one, but I think the one that sort of acts as a catalyst for all the others is just staying relevant and justifying ourselves and fighting for the resources that we all know we deserve and that our students deserve. One of the things that's been so heartening and so encouraging about being at Muhlenberg is that the administration of the college really seems to want to make this department and our program, a point of distinction on campus. And I think that's increasingly rare. It's just hard to constantly, and I really can't complain because I'm at a wonderful college, but, for my colleagues that are out teaching in the K-12 system, is just keeping yourself relevant and letting the administration know that what you do matters for the students in so many different ways, right? It's not just a class. You're also building community, and you're acting as ambassadors for your institution when you go out into the wider community. I think if there's one thing that we really have to focus on, it's remaining relevant and letting people know that we matter.
Yeah, absolutely. So how about you, Andrew? What advice would you give to your younger self, maybe the young man who's starting at UOP?
I would give myself the same advice that I mentioned earlier, which is just to trust the process, to trust that things work out the way that they should. And of course you have to go out and you have to fight for what you want, but you also have to be open to paths that aren't necessarily the one that you think is right. When I graduated from college, I had a very distinct idea about what my future was going to look like. And it didn't work out that way. And in the long run, I think I've been so much more fulfilled and so much happier that it didn't work out that way, because I've had experiences that I would never have had if I had, sort of doggedly stuck to what I thought I wanted to do with the rest of my life. How many of us really know what we want to do with the rest of our lives when we're 22? Nobody does, really, But the skills that I gained along the way and the experiences that I've had, I think have really helped me in terms of the career that I ended up having.
Yeah, I think it's a very rare person who is focused enough to know what they want and then can actually achieve exactly what they want.
Well, I took 6 years between my bachelor's and my master's degree. I needed that time to just go out and decide what music meant to me.
What were you doing during that time?
I was a substitute teacher. I did, I worked in retail for a few years. It was all the sorts of things that you do when you get out of college. You're not quite sure what the next few years are going to look like. Sure. I was always involved with music in one way or another. I was either conducting or composing or, whatever, but I needed those 6 years to work on deciding how I wanted music to be a part of my life and what that was going to look like. And in the long run, it was a huge help. It's advice that I give to all of the undergrads that I've ever worked with is, take at least a year, take a gap year, and really decide what you want, especially if you're in composition, because you probably need that time to polish your portfolio. The stuff that you wrote as an undergrad may not get you into a master's program necessarily. So take that time and really hone what you're doing. 6 years was probably a little bit too long, but again, I'm really glad I did it, because I'm a much more well-rounded person than I was, when I was 22.
Sure. What's your favorite work for Wind Ensemble or band?
I knew you were going to ask.
Of course, I ask everyone this question.
I spent a lot of time, and this is not a cop-out. I know everybody feels the same way, but it's not a cop-out. I spent a lot of time with Lincolnshire Posey this summer. No intention of conducting it for the foreseeable future, but I needed to spend some time with it to really, really absorb it. And it's just such a stunningly good piece of music, and everything that Fred Fennell did to make that, to create that beautifully edited full score, the scholarly work that went into it, but the orchestration is brilliant. The harmonic language is brilliant. Of course, we all know that about Granger, but Lincolnshire Posey is just a stunning piece of music. But if I had to pick a piece that, if you said, I want you to conduct a concert tomorrow, Courtly Airs and Dances by Ron Nelson is just such a blast to conduct. It's so beautiful. And, and it's got all of these different moods and colors and emotions, and it's the sort of work that even more advanced bands can really dig into. But even, advanced middle school, high school groups can pull off. I love Courtly Airs and Dances. Just that's on my program list somewhere down the line, for sure. Yeah.
It's a great piece. And, I just keep coming back to the Lincolnshire. I need to maybe ask people that question now and say, but you can't have Lincolnshire on there.
Then everybody says, well, okay, then Prague, music for Prague. No, I was thinking about this as I was getting ready for this. I thought, well, what did I play in college that I liked so much? And, I had never heard of David Gillingham until I got to college, and that David Gillingham's music just blows me away every time, there's his. I've got one little piece of his on my first program, because that's a composer that I think it's important for my students to know that I like,
Sure,
and it's,
sure.
Again, this idea of overtures, that this is me introducing myself to an ensemble, and these are composers that I think are worth knowing.
Yeah. Yeah. I never asked anyone this question, but do you remember what was the first concert band piece or serious piece of concert band music you remember?
I remember playing a lot of Frank Erickson.
Uh-huh. Yeah.
And my middle school and high school band director liked Frank Erickson. And all of those little pieces, the piece, I'll tell you, the piece that busted me wide open as a player, and taught me what it was to play in a band, was The Legend of Alcobaça. I don't even remember the composer's name, but it's a suite based on some Portuguese legend, and it has these really screamingly high horn parts, and that's what opened up my top register as a horn player. I went to band camp for the first time as a junior, rising junior or whatever, sophomore, I guess, and I could play a high G, right? But this piece, I think, went up to a B flat or a C or something like that. And when I got back from band camp that summer, I could play the Mozart Second Concerto without too much trouble, But The Legend of Alcobaça, I'd have to look it up because it doesn't get played very often, but it's a really stunning piece of music, very dramatic.
Yeah. I don't know that piece at all either. I'll look up the composer and make sure I put it in the show notes. For me, it was Festivo.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
Nellie Bell. I was a freshman in high school, and we did Festivo. And I remember thinking it was so different than anything I had done up till then.
Yeah. His music is different from everybody of that generation. Do you know what I mean? It's more sort of unabashedly repetitive, and there's there's these like little hints of, in some ways, of early minimalism in his music that you don't see in other composers that we would lump into that sort of mid-century band composer. Category.
Of course, we're talking about Václav Nelibel.
Yeah.
Awesome. Thanks, Andrew.
You're welcome.
Is there anything coming up that you'd like to share? I know that you're just starting at Muhlenberg, so you have lots to share, but is there anything specific?
Our first concert is Saturday, May 18th on the campus of Muhlenberg College. So listeners in the Lehigh Valley that might be interested in coming out and seeing what we're up to, it's a really wonderful, eclectic program. I'm really proud of it, and I think we'll be able to pull it off really nicely. I don't have a ton coming up in terms of performances of my own stuff. I've been so focused on getting Muhlenberg off the ground that I wrote this little piece for them for the Wind Ensemble here over the summer, and I just finished a piece for string orchestra for the Loomis Chaffee Academy. I don't know if you know it's a prep school in Windsor, Connecticut.
No, I don't know it.
Yeah, a good friend of mine is the orchestra director up there, so I wrote a little piece for string orchestra for them. But it's really right now is just getting Muhlenberg off the ground and building this wind ensemble into something that we'll all be proud of in the next couple of years. Yeah,
I'm sure that they've got a great person on their faculty. Congratulations on that.
Thank you so much, Mark. I really appreciate that.
You're welcome. So if you're in the Eastern Pennsylvania area, New Jersey, Philadelphia, look Andrew up.
Yeah.
Have him come out to your school, all those good things.
Yeah. Reach out by all means.
So how can people reach out to you? How can they get in touch with you?
If you're interested in my compositions, the best place to start is my website, which is andrewardizzoia.info. The last name is Ardizzoia. And there's links to scores and links to recordings there, and you can find out where I'm being performed and so on. If you're interested in contacting me for Muhlenberg related things, it's andrewardizzoia@muhlenberg.edu. And I'm very good with email. I don't ignore emails. And I'd love to get out into the community. I'd love to meet the folks working in the schools in the Lehigh Valley or even in New Jersey, because we're very, very close to the New Jersey border. And it's all about creating these relationships and making good things happen for everybody involved.
All right. Thank you, Andrew. I really appreciate your time.
Sure thing, Mark. Thank you so much. This has been wonderful.